A Cricketing View, an irregular podcast about cricket and other things. Episode 2. My guest today is Gaurav Sabnis, an associate professor of marketing at Stevens School of Business in Hoboken, New Jersey. Welcome, Gaurav.
Thanks, Karthikeya. Great to be on the podcast.
Very nice to have you. I wanted to talk to you basically because I've had a few questions which are also open in the among people who follow cricket in this era especially about the viability of test cricket. And I've sort of been trying to understand what that means. Let me start with a basic question. Does cricket exist to make money, or does it make money in order to exist? From the disciplinary point of view of marketing and from your point of view as a cricket fan, how do you think about that question?
Yeah, and that's that's a great question about like whether cricket exists to make money or whether cricket makes money to exist. And at a broader level, that can be applied to any sport in the world. And in different aspects and for different shareholders, the answer might vary. But my thinking is any sport, including cricket, including test cricket, makes money in order to exist. So it's just that once there has been a commercialization of the sport, there have been opportunities to make a lot of money off them, especially thanks to advertisers. Until advertisers came along, the main source of revenue was just getting people to buy the tickets. So they were literally just making money to exist. Like they were charging people that money so they can cover their costs. But since marketing and advertising and broadcast media came into the picture, now there are opportunities to make money. So there might be stakeholders in the game, for example, TV channels or some websites for whom cricket exists to make money. But I think at a broader level, if you look at the overall ecosystem, I think cricket is making money in order to exist. And that kind of explains why test cricket is still going on, even though in the purest business terms, like if somebody was making a decision just as an investor or somebody like a Warren Buffett type, they might not think of it as a viable product. But because the answer to your question, I think broadly is that it makes money to exist. That's why things like test cricket or a bunch of other sports that don't seem as as lucrative, they also exist.
Right, because one of the dilemmas in cricket is that the only sort of finite resource in the game is the calendar. Mm-hmm. So it has become a question of, well, how is Chris Gale's time best spent? Do you build more tournaments where he can play T20, or do you get him to represent the West Indies? And in part, this is Chris Gale's decision, but his decision, the choice before him is placed by the administrators, right? The West Indies administrators, the ICC administrators, right, and all the various franchise administrators. So what has sort of one of the dilemmas I have is that a T20 game lasts 40 overs, 3 hours, mm-hmm, and a test match lasts 15 sessions and 30 hours. Now, if you compare one test match to one T20 game, the advertising opportunities in a test match are probably by an order of magnitude greater than they are in a T20 game. Like even if you invent like a strategic timeout or whatever it is. Yeah. Right. And all this is premised on the basic idea that with television and the internet and broadcasting generally, the number of spectators you can reach in the world now live is orders of magnitude greater than what you can fit into a stadium.
Yep.
And this is true not only in cricket, but it's also true in football and Major League Baseball, and every sport is trying to exploit this basic advantage of scale.
Right, exactly.
And so the revenue from the gate and at the ground is not only is that being reduced as a share of the total revenue, but also there are innovations at the ground which are actually designed to appeal to people on TV. So there's this spatial cleavage in sort of where the game is held and where it is viewed, and there's also this form related cleavage between T20 and test cricket. Right. So how do we think through these distinctions? Is it simply a matter of arithmetic, or is there a is there some more basic rationality involved in how administrators might think about these questions?
Right. So, like the one huge change has been that gate receipts matter almost not at all at an aggregate level. It's mainly about advertising and TV revenue. Gate receipts will matter to certain stadiums, and of course, you always want to make money if you can.
Yeah.
A big change I think has been since the arrival of TV has been that the utility function, to use an economics or marketing term, like whenever you are buying or consuming something, you are trying to get some utility out of it. And what are the main aspects that you're trying to get? So when I am, let's say, buying a can of soda, part of it is to just satiate my thirst, part of it is to just the taste. Maybe I like that taste. Part of it might be that I am a huge Coke fan. So, I'll only, so in that sense, it's like a self-expression or, whatever it is. So there are these different aspects. So if we use that framework for consuming any sport at the stadium, I think there has been a generational change in the sense that before the arrival of TV, if you really wanted to consume the sport itself, like watch the nitty-gritties of the game and see what is actually happening, you had to go to the stadium. And you had to go to the stadium and watch it. The other options available were you either read about it in a newspaper or you listen to the commentary on radio. What television changed was, and this is not just true for cricket but for everything else, is that television gives you a much more detailed close-up look at the sporting aspects of things, in the sense that you want to see exactly how a batsman is hitting a particular shot or how a bowler is holding the ball before he delivers it or whatever it is. TV has come along and just substituted that in-stadium experience. So what that means is the utility function of going to a stadium has completely changed. It has become more about the experience. It has become more about the social aspects of it. It has become more about creating memories. So, for example, when this recent West Indies, India's tour to West Indies, as you know, I watched both test matches. I watched the first one in stadium in Antigua and I watched the second one in Jamaica at home. And at home, I could see a lot more detail about what was happening as opposed to when I watched it in the stadium. But 5, 10, 20 years later, when you ask me about something, I will remember the Antigua test that I attended at the stadium much more than I will remember the TV test, because my utility function was different. It was not about like watching the nitty-gritties of the game, but the experience itself. And that, I think, is something that administrators and managers of teams or stadiums have realized. That's why they try to increase the experience aspect at the stadium. Things like having stuff on the big screen, having cheerleaders, having a bunch of promotions, etc. So yeah, like gone are the days when a significant majority or even a plurality of people going to a stadium were there for the pure variable of watching that sport, as opposed to something larger, something at a higher level of abstractions in terms of satisfying your need, to use a marketing term.
Is that also because going to the stadium requires far greater effort and is therefore necessarily significantly more infrequent than switching on your TV and today I will watch India versus South Africa, tomorrow I will watch Pakistan versus Australia, the next day I will watch the Caribbean Premier League, and so on and so forth, right? So that's why, when something is that easy, it's not as memorable, right? Whereas, I still remember, for instance, the first time I saw one day international at a cricket ground. It was at CCI. It was West Indies versus South Africa in 1993. And I still remember like the first over, which was, Curtly Ambrose bowling to Andrew Hudson.
Yeah.
And if you tell me, I've watched hundreds of ODIs since then, dozens and dozens of test matches, and I could not tell you at all who bowled the first ball in most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a cost, and it's true about almost everything we consume, that whenever we consume something, there is a cost, not just in terms of what we pay to buy the product, but other things associated with it. Be it
all the effort we put in.
Yeah, effort, time, the choices, even the opportunity cost, for example. Right?
Correct.
Like there's an opportunity cost in the sense that when I am going to watch a match, I am giving up something else. And that is even true when I'm watching something on TV, but it is especially true when I'm spending a decent amount of money and time to go watch something at a stadium. So, and I think that, like, people talk about dwindling attendance at test matches and think that there is an overall decline in the interest in test matches, which is something I'm not sure about. I think it's more the case that if a test match happened in, let's say, Bombay in the 1970s, it was maybe one test match that was going to happen every 3 years. And it was the only international cricket that was going to happen every 3 years. So it was like a special occasion. So it might not be a perfect parallel, but it's like going on a honeymoon or a bachelor party or spending on a wedding or whatever. Like when stadiums were packed until, let's say, 20 years ago, even for test matches, it's because it was such a rare thing to do. It had that rarity value for consuming international or top quality cricket of any kind. Today, in most places, you have the IPL, you have one day international, and there are just so many test matches going on. Besides, you also have the TV. So that substitute effect, or how else you can spend your time or money or effort, that calculation has changed a lot. So if I were a person, if I were a cricket lover, I'm not even talking about like a hardcore cricket lover, just a regular cricket lover, in 1974 or 75, living in Bombay, the visiting team and a test match happening or a high level Ranji Trophy match happening was literally the only opportunity for me to go and experience it and watch it, other than listening to it on radio or reading it. Today, if I'm living in 2019 Bombay, I have all these other options to have that same experience. So the value of an experience of going to a test match is that much lower, right? And that has happened with baseball as well, right? Like, so when I've gone to the Caribbean twice now, like spending a couple of $1,000 every time just to go watch that match at a stadium, because it has that value for me, because it's rare for me, right? But at the same time, even though I like tennis or I like baseball, I don't really go every year to the US Open, or I don't go to a Yankees or a Mets game every time it's available, because for me, it doesn't have that scarcity, or it doesn't have that rarity. And I think that is what has happened with attendance at test match cricket, is that they don't have that scarcity or that rarity value that they once used to have.
It seems to me that there's a interesting disconnect between this idea of memorability, if to coin a term, and how much money can be made
Yeah.
from that, right? So I mean, I've this has always struck me. Like, Manchester City is a football club in Manchester. Guardiola manages it. Very good football team. But they earn 52 or 57 million a year from gates and match day receipts. And there are maybe 30, 40 games a year at that stadium, and they also play away from home, right?
Right.
But last year they signed a team jersey contract with Puma, right? An apparel contract with Puma, which earns them 65 million a year for the next 10 years,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So there's a paradox here, isn't it? Like, to care about all the people coming to a stadium and look after them and feed them and make sure they have enough to drink, they have a proper shade, they have an easy time coming and going from the stadium, so the public transit has to be good. If an administrator has to take care of all that and it earns them less money than shirt sponsorship for the Indian national team or the Mumbai Indians team or whatever it is, then how do you make sense of those incentives, right? Especially if the original question which I started with is not settled.
Yeah. Also, one thing is that I think gate receipts, or just getting people into the stadium, has become less a purely economic decision in terms of the profit or the money it makes you, and more about how it feeds into the overall marketing strategy.
I see.
Right? In the sense that I don't think it's as much a profit center as it is kind of a cost center in the sense that your main money is being made through TV, it's being made through endorsements, and even if we just stay within the stadium, like I was talking to a few people like with a research project of mine about hockey and stuff, and they were saying that the in stadia advertising makes them more money than the gate receipts in the sense that when they're putting up all these ads along the boundary line or somewhere else, and you see the brand logos over the scoreboard or whatever, those contracts, so you don't even have to go to like the jersey or the apparel contract, even just within the stadium is the branding that is making them more money. But, and that is where like the marketing strategy angle comes in, for a team it is good to have their stadiums full, right? And if they can make some money off it in the on the side, and Manchester City or Manchester United or most of these sports teams are in the New York Yankees have enough following that they can make some money or they can charge a premium and there's a high enough demand. But essentially at the core it is like if our games keep being played to empty stadiums, then it doesn't look good. So they want fans to be there, and it's not just to make money from the fans but to feed into this overall the following the team has, the glamour the team has, the loyalty or the prestige the team has. That is why they're doing it, right? And that's why they are like, you'll see a lot of different marketing promotions for having people attend matches.
Right. I mean, is there a case for just making the ticket free?
Oh yeah, and a lot of teams do that. They'll be either free or giveaway or minimum. So there'll be cases where, and I think Australian cricket does that a lot, where they'll have these days where you can just come in for free, or if you're in a certain segment, so let's say you're under a certain age or you're in school or whatever else, you can come in for free. And, practically speaking, unless we are talking about England or unless we are talking about a few marquee tests in Australia, the prices are really low in the sense that they're not really, I mean, they're not free per se, but it's very rare that somebody is not going to watch a game because of the cost of the ticket.
Correct.
Like yeah, it's almost like and there is a stream of research and marketing that shows that if you give something away for free, its perception goes down. But yeah, like I said, I went to Antigua recently, I went to Trinidad a couple of years ago, and the price I paid for the tickets was maybe 2% of my entire budget. Like the expense was more on the travel and the hotel and everything else, because the tickets are just super cheap, at least for a test match. I think when it comes to T20s, maybe that equation changes a little. And again, that goes back to the age-old economic question of demand versus supply. So I told you, right? I was sitting in that Andy Roberts stand in Antigua. So they said that for T20s, those tickets go for about $200 for like marquee T20s, because it is literally the best place to watch. But because in tests, the demand is not high, they just had a flat rate. I think it was about $20. No, 15 US dollars. Just enter and then you can just sit anywhere in the stadium. And there were literally only 9 of us sitting there because it was far away from the ground. Everybody else was sitting close to the pavilion to kind of interact with the players and all that. Right? So the point being that like even it is contextual in the sense that when you want to make money. So if it is obviously, so New York Yankees tickets for a regular game will be, you can sit in the bleachers for like $12, $15. But if you're going for a playoff game like it is on right now, it is going to be much more expensive.
Those costs are not being determined by, we have to make an income, right? Those costs are being determined by more complicated questions. Like,
I mean, you can also make this extra money.
This whole question of, what is the popularity of Test cricket? Is it fair to say that the question is not whether the Test cricket is popular, but whether people have figured out a way to make money off it? Is there something to be said for the idea that maybe in 2019 you should not have a sport where the game starts at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning when most of the people with disposable incomes and an interest in cricket will either be in school or at work, and they will not be able to watch?
Yeah, so that is an interesting thing, and I think we chatted about it a little bit on Twitter about this before as well. So there are like three parts to this, the way I see it. One thing is that because of TV advertising and because of the huge general following that cricket has around the world, and the fact that we have a commercial break every 5 minutes. Like not all sports have that, but we have a commercial break every 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the cost, it is taken care of. So as long as test match is being broadcast, and I've talked to a couple of people in the in ESPN and Star Sports about this as well, that they are never actually making a loss on a test match, or neither is the stadium because they get enough money. So like there is no downside to having test cricket. Now the question is, could you do something in instead of that, right? So if you could do something instead of that, so if there is an opportunity cost, what is that opportunity cost? Now that opportunity cost comes from the fact that could you put something on the air at that time between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. that people would
Correct.
rather watch? And I don't know if the answer to that is clear, which is why most all T20s and most one-day internationals are night or day-night. Because it's not like, oh, if I start a T20 at 12 p.m., suddenly I'll get a house full at the ground, right? So in that sense, it's a great thing to have test matches during the day where all around the
For
world, and
TV,
of course,
that's,
yeah, for TV, like people can watch it for a little time
yeah.
and then go about their thing. The second aspect, I think, and I talked to you about this before, I think the biggest reason why test matches keep going and will keep going is the players and the administrators like it enough, right? And a lot of us fans, especially those who consider ourselves Puritan fans, are always like, oh, I am like a test cricket purist, and all these players are nowadays mercenaries and they only care about T20 and all that. And I think it's the opposite, because imagine if we are just fans doing our own thing, leading our own lives, doing our own jobs, and still watching test cricket, like we are that much into it. These are people who have dedicated their lives to cricket.
Yeah.
So for them, it is important enough to participate in. For them, it's a prestige thing. So, for example, I'll give you a couple of examples. One thing is that both Kohli and Bumrah, right, the two biggest names in recent years from the past season of Indian cricket, could have easily taken a break after the World Cup and not played in the West Indies series, but they still played it. They didn't play it to make money, right? They didn't play it for like glory or anything. Like they've already had enough glory of their own. They played it because of their own internal personal love of test cricket and the fact that it was the start of the test championship or whatever it is. So like they played it. And another example I'll give you is a guy we have discussed about many times in the past is Rohit Sharma. Rohit Sharma has won more IPLs than anyone else. He's made more World Cup centuries than anyone else, and he's like generally in the in the one day and T20 form of the game considered a great. But he still has that hunger to keep proving himself. He moved to opening, he did well. Like why does he need to do that? He's making enough money just from his T20 fame. He's not like Chris Gayle, who's in a poor country where he has to pick and choose how to make enough money for his family. Like Rohit Sharma can just focus on IPL, focus on one days, focus on T20 international, and just sit out test matches. Why
He
is he
doesn't need to travel anywhere. That's true.
Yeah. So he's doing that because for him. So I think like a lot of us fans think that Test cricket is alive because of us, because there are a few of us Puritan fans. No, I think Test cricket is alive because the players still care about it enough. Like for them, that is still the purest form of the game. There might be a few players who don't consider that, so there'll be people who will just give up on tests. But even that decision comes much later in life. Like I don't think we've reached
Yeah.
a stage where a 14-year-old is going to say, "Oh, I don't care about test cricket. I'm only going to focus on T20s."
So are there any sort of are there second order effects that we should worry about, as in cumulatively, if this state of affairs continues, if the current state of affairs such as it is, and as we've discussed, it's far from hopeless for Test cricket, but it is certainly disrupted to some extent. both by cable television and the internet, and by other more immediately lucrative formats. So cumulatively over, let's say, 15 years or one cricketing generation, if this current state of affairs persists, is there sort of a second order effect which we can expect on perceptions of Test cricket, on how spectators view it, how the new generation of players views it, and so on? Because let's face it, Rohit Sharma, Ajinkya Rahane, Virat Kohli, all of them, when they were in school playing age group whatever it is, BCCI was still against T20 until like 2007.
True.
And nobody had heard of T20 before 2003. So it was all about playing for India. But now Rishabh Pant comes along, and he's in a generation where, there's a very, very good living to be made playing IPL. It's also less stressful than playing for 30 hours, playing 12 test matches a year, which is pretty much what a full-time international cricketer will do. So I think you're right. As you said, it's not really about the money, right? It's like with all the top artists and the top sports persons, they're in it for the sport. They're in it for reasons other than making a living, which they're obviously doing very well already. Mm-hmm. For people who are not sort of in that absolute elite level, mm-hmm. But who so far have sort of built up this domestic system, which really is the stage on which these exceptional players emerge, out of which these exceptional players emerge. Is there some sort of cumulative second order effect that we can expect on this sort of basic, sort of mid-level talent?
Yeah, and
I'm asking you about players because I think your original point was about players.
Yeah, and that is actually a great question, right? And I don't know if we can only speculate, because the way I'm seeing it, the way things like cricketers start even now is they're taught the basics first. So if it is possible to train somebody to be just a T20 player from the time he or she is 5 or 6 years or 8 years old, like whenever the training starts, or like, is it possible? It might be possible. I don't know. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, when I look at T20 and the success of T20, T20 has succeeded. And again, going back to like business terminology or jargon, it has succeeded on the backs of infrastructure or supply capabilities of Test cricket, or first class cricket more specifically. So it's not like somebody set out to teach Rishabh Pant or Hardik Pandya to be these big heavy hitters, but they were taught to be, play white ball cricket as kids, and then eventually, because these other options are available, they build their skills on that. So will we ever have an infrastructure or a feeder system or a training system which is just like, okay, I'm only teaching your kid from the age of 7 to be a T20 player? And is that even possible? Like, I'm trying to think in technical terms, like, what would you teach somebody who's only playing T20 that you would not teach them to play in Test cricket? Like, maybe leaving the ball, but
it's a question of incentives, right? I mean, it's a question of do you train somebody to it's one thing to train somebody to be a really good bowler of, up to 24 balls a match. And it's another to train somebody to bowl 24 overs a day in a test match. Now, those are different skills.
But that itself comes much later in life, right? Like when you're teaching somebody who's 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, you're not trying to closet them into like these narrow...
I'm not convinced, I'm not convinced. For instance, in American football, there's this idea that, back in the 50s and 60s, physically, the wide receivers and the tight ends and the linebackers were not that far apart.
All right, I see what
compared to what they are now. Now it's like they are, almost they're created in a laboratory, you know. So,
Yeah. Although like American football is a much more athletic sport, right? Like
correct.
each position is attached to something. So like the running backs will always be short on
Yeah.
average because the running back needs a low center of gravity, and a wide receiver, a wide out especially, not just a slot receiver, but a wide receiver will be taller because being taller helps.
And
So
fast.
I don't know if there is as much. Is it so easy to identify those objective factors in cricket? Because I know
I
in
can I
baseball,
can imagine I can imagine, for instance, in T20, a hitter sort of being trained for power, you know,
Mhm.
uh, as opposed to a test batsman who's trained to last 6 hours and be able to concentrate for 6 hours.
True,
I mean,
but
that would be like in baseball, you have this distinction, right? I mean, the leadoff hitters tend to be, you
right.
know, not have power, but they tend to keep the ball in play and they tend to be really quick between the bases. Whereas, the cleanup guy is usually bigger and more muscular and, is basically a hits for power rather than consistency.
Right.
So
You're right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I
And
can imagine that kind of specialization coming in, and then people training for that kind of thing, because you can't really do that overnight, right? And you have to probably train for like 4 or 5 years to actually become good enough to be a specialist power hitter. Even if you are given even if you have the basic attributes like you're tall and powerful, and you have the genes for it, you
mhm.
still have to work at it, right? And
Yeah.
that's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work. Exactly.
So that kind of specialization I can imagine. But the question, this subject that we've come up hit upon is interesting because it gets to this question of identity. Because as you said, originally T20 sort of got its popularity on the backs of superstars from the test team.
Yeah.
Like VVS Lakshman and Anil Kumble and all these people were icon players in the
Yeah.
first IPL. And
Right.
then by the time Ganguly was like 38 or something, there were no takers. Like he was not picked up in an auction in 1 year, and that
Mhm.
in the IPL, right? So
Yeah.
the game has the T20 has sort of, is it a good business decision for T20 to acquire its own identity, and what are the implications of that happening for like Test cricket?
And see, the thing again, going back to a classic economics or business principle is, are T20 and Test cricket complements or are they substitutes? Right.
I see.
And that is a very important question because, and for those of the listeners who might not know, complement is something in which one product's demand helps the other product's demand. So if there are more printers sold, there will be more printer cartridges sold. So they're kind of like complements. Substitute is when you can substitute one for the other. So if there are more Uber rides, there will be fewer cars bought or fewer traditional taxis got, right? So the big question, I guess, is are T20 and Test cricket complements or substitutes, right? And I think it's from a consumer point of view, I think they might be complements in the sense that you never have to choose as such directly between Test cricket and T20 cricket to watch because they're never scheduled at the same time. From a
Correct.
player's point of view, especially what you said, and administrator and coaching staff point of view, I think they might, in the long run, end up being substitutes. So, like
So you,
Bumrah,
you
nobody
which
wanted.
means you can do one or the other.
Yeah, or you can do one or the other, or you can prioritize one or the other. And a few players have done that recently, like Chris Gale and a bunch of other people. But yeah, from the play, and eventually it's all about the players, right? Going back to the original question you asked, is cricket making money to exist? Which, if we think it does, then the players are the way that it exists. So it's up to the players to ask. And like on the one hand, we have people who only play T20s, don't care about tests. On the other hand, we have Cheteshwar Pujara who did the historical thing of like being the main contributor in winning India Test series in Australia for the first time ever, but he's not in the IPL. There are like hundreds of people in the IPL, and India's most successful test batsman of the last few months is not in the
Right.
IPL. So so if you are a kid who's growing up, do you want to become more like Pujara or do you want to become more like Rohit Sharma? Right, and and that is definitely a substitute effect.
But is that I mean, because I mean, being Cheteshwar Pujara is not a bad thing in the sense that
Oh,
playing for India pays well. Playing first class cricket pays reasonably well. And Pujara didn't play in the IPL, but he went off to England and he played county in the county championship. Which an IPL player will not get to play, in a sense.
oh
You
yeah.
know,
I'm not saying Pujara has a bad life, but for every Pujara who succeeded, there are probably 50
yeah, it's
almost
a
Pujaras who did not. So if you're an almost Pujara, you either make it to the test level or you are, working a regular middle class job. But if you are an almost Rohit Sharma, even if you don't reach the stage of Rohit Sharma, you can still be a player in one of these many other franchises and make more than like my basic point is an almost Rohit Sharma is probably making much more money than an almost Cheteshwar Pujara, at least
correct.
today.
I see.
And I think it might change, and I think it might get even more so in the next few decades. So yeah.
Should Test cricket pursue a franchise-based model? Is there a in the context of what you said about them being complements and not substitutes for the viewer,
Mhm.
right? But possibly being substitutes for the players. Should 4-day or unlimited overs cricket or traditional cricket or whatever you want to call it pursue a franchise-based model with all the usual things about auctions, any transfers, any you know city-based franchises and whatnot?
But doesn't that already isn't that what first class cricket is, or are you meaning like do you mean like corporatization of first class cricket?
Yeah, I mean, right now, all 4-day cricket is basically representative, right? I mean, there are geographical entities and you know, there isn't really a market, a mature market for players to, you know, have, say, a 2-year contract here and then, 12 months into the 2-year contract, they start renegotiating for a new contract, or they think about going to another club, right? Even though
Only
technically you're right, the county clubs are clubs, and the Maharashtra Cricket Association, the Bombay team is there's nothing stopping a Bombay player from going somewhere else, right?
yeah,
And many
that's
of them
very
do.
happening in Ranji for like over 10 years, right? Like they've had foreign
Oh
players.
yeah, much longer
Yeah,
than that. But it's still presented and considered as a representative game, right?
yeah,
There's a selection committee, and they can basically select any player from Bombay. They
yeah.
don't have to sign the player for a contract before the player will play for them. A 16-year-old Tendulkar played for Bombay.
Hmm.
Without There was no competition for his signature at all.
Right,
It was not like Delhi was knocking on his door at the night before he signed for Bombay and saying, "Oh well, we'll offer you more money. Come play for Delhi." You
right.
know,
Okay, I see what you mean.
is there
So
is there is there a how do you think through that question?
yeah, and like as you were mentioning that, I know you also follow baseball. So what you're suggesting is like a minor league for cricket, as opposed to just what is geographic, because that is how minor league operates in baseball for the major leagues. That there are all these teams that like minor league, for those who don't follow baseball, is kind of like their version of first class cricket, is a one level below, but almost most of the teams are associated with a major league team. So like the Yankees will have a few minor league teams that will serve as feeders.
Correct.
So
Like
yeah.
farm teams,
Sorry.
farm teams basically.
Yeah, farm teams. So like the New York Yankees have the Staten Island Yankees and a couple of others. They are also like, it's not like you have to live in Staten Island to play for the Staten Island Yankees,
Yeah.
but they are just one level below the New York Yankees, which is like the second most valuable team in the world or whatever. And then yeah, I
So what
think
if
that
what if you could have a system where uh, I don't know. India could trade. Uh, who should we trade? Oh, let's say India could trade Hanuma Vihari for say Dean Elgar. Because they have he's an opener which we need, and Vihari is a very good middle order batsman whom South Africa needs.
That's actually a great idea. That why, like,
That
me,
would
I'm
be
not
a
not
true
nationalist.
franchise-based system, right?
Yeah.
Because then the players could offer their services, and there would be bidders for those services.
Wow, yeah, that would be an awesome idea. And you know me, like even outside of cricket or sports, like my views on society or politics. So yeah, like I think nations are an unnecessary construct. Yeah, that would be great if like national teams could trade. And England has already kind of managed.
They poach players.
Yeah, but like when I was in the Caribbean a couple of months ago, half the people were ranting about how stupid the West Indies cricket board was to let Jofra Archer be poached by England, and why couldn't they have done better? Like this would never happen with India. Do you see Bumrah going and playing for England? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. It's up to Bumrah. If he wants to play for England, he can play for England. Yeah, that I think would be a great. Yeah, I'd not thought about that very explicitly, but yeah.
Would that change the complement substitute situation at all, or would that not have anything, and would that not affect it at all?
I don't know. It might because like there is the thing is thanks to the subcontinent, there is just such a huge viewership and audience for cricket that you might get everybody to satisfy all the specific segments that you have, right? And this is something that has changed in marketing in the last 20 years, which is that fragmentation of segments. So
Right.
just to give you an example, the most watched TV episodes of the last of in history have been like episodes from MASH or episodes from Seinfeld, which got like 70, 80 million viewers in the US. The reason was there was not much else going around, right? You either watch that show or you watch a couple of other things. Today, even the most successful TV show, even Game of Thrones or anything, cannot reach those numbers because it's just so fragmented.
Right.
Right? Like there are so many other options out there, and there are so many micro segments out there. So as long as you're,
Even though it's a global market now
yeah, I mean,
because of
even
the internet.
no. So these numbers I'm saying are specifically with about
Terrestrial.
yeah. So like they had something like 80 million people watching the MASH finale, but no 80 million people at one time will ever watch a TV show in the US. They might watch it cumulatively online
Yeah.
over a period of time, but so it's the same with Test cricket, right? Like that, because the thing with sports is it has to be watched in real time
Yeah.
at that exact moment. So in that sense, in a way, Test cricket being in the daytime is what is saving it, in the sense that there is no competition
Yeah.
for it at that time. So if you have a micro segment that is big enough, so the subcontinent is what almost 2 billion in population, and if you find enough people who are interested in Test cricket that will follow it, and even ball by ball commentary, because ball
Yeah.
by ball commentary is the 21st century version of radio commentary. Like nobody was listening to radio commentary for the rhetorical flourishes of the commentators. They literally wanted ball by ball commentary.
Yeah.
And today, what ball by ball commentary does online is like radio commentary. So as long as there are people following, and just my sense is that there are still, at least in 2019, enough people following Test cricket for it to be at the very least viable, in addition to the TV advertising that I talked about.
Ah, interesting. Because these are sort of open questions right now. There isn't like a. I don't think these questions are getting resolved anytime soon,
Yeah,
because I don't think you can. So I mean, for instance, T20, the way it is developing, is unforeseeable. Well, I'm trying to imagine an era where there will be a pure T20 star of the stature of Kohli.
yeah,
You know, and that currently seems to me to be really, really far away. for reasons of memorability, for all sorts of reasons. And I'm wondering whether that sort of stardom is necessary, for T20 to actually finally have its identity, apart from cricket, to establish itself. Okay, we are a different game. It's like baseball is not rounders. Similarly, T20 is not cricket.
Yeah.
Uh,
Might be, and as you said earlier, it might be a generational thing. So kids who are growing up today who just
T20 natives, is that a thing?
T20 natives. But the thing is, even today, like because of these, so it's just that I think, and maybe it's just my Test cricket fan bias speaking, and I like T20s as well. So it's not like I'm not one of those. I only hate one-day cricket, but I love Tests and I love T20s. So it's not like I am, but I might be biased. But I think there is just something so compelling and so fundamentally interesting about Test cricket that I don't like. I don't see it ever really going away because it is not a business decision. If it were a pure business decision, maybe, but I think it is partly sports decision. Like golf, for example, like the best parallel I can see to Test cricket is golf, in the sense that most of the viewership and the money they make is from a few tournaments, like the Masters that last for 3 days or whatever, where people will go attend the Masters tournaments and watch it, and like the golf players make a lot of money. But for the Masters to exist, there has to be all these other hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of lower level golf tournaments that last for 3 days as well, that have almost no viewers, be it at the golf course or on TV. So I think of TV channel in that way. Like golf has that, like for a huge chunk of people, it has that compelling value, right? Of course, there is no real T20 equivalent of golf. Nobody has turned putt-putt golf or miniature golf into a sports series. But I see Test cricket in that way. Even if we consider it a completely different sport from T20, I'm optimistic that it will continue to exist because I love it that much, and maybe I'm biased. I think there will be enough people who love it that much.
I always think of baseball. Every time baseball has looked like it's in trouble, something has come along and captured the public imagination. So, you had the dead ball era, and then you had Ruth, right? And then, you had the Depression, and then you had Lights.
Yeah.
And then you had, in the late 40s and 50s, you had, Jackie Robinson and, the post-war boom.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you have the internet. Things have happened in America which baseball has either adopted or adapted or, responded to. And sort of it has made itself a part of American life.
Yeah.
And it is more than just a commodity, right? And it's not it has an existence beyond being a commodity. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The hope is that Test cricket will have that sort of existence. But right now what Test cricket seems to be doing is that it seems to sort of persist oblivious of these changes. And I wonder whether it needs to respond, and how do you think about that? How do you think about this problem?
Yeah, I mean,
how does it coexist in a changing world?
Yeah, that is actually a great parallel because like you've lived here, I live here, so like NFL and especially NBA are much bigger businesses, commercially successful than baseball, but baseball still exists and baseball is never going away. And right now with the playoffs on and everything, like everybody's attention focuses on it. So if Test cricket can get to that level, I think it will succeed. The way I think about it is that a lot of it has to do again from the players angle, which I said earlier, that the main reason Test cricket exists today is because of the players and also the traditional administrators. If it was just less left up to investors or a purely business decision, Test cricket would be dead, right? Because they would be like, oh, we need to save these resources for more lucrative options. Similarly, like baseball exists because so many kids and everybody plays baseball. Like it is part of the American DNA. And I think in the same way, cricket is part of the Indian DNA and it is part of the Australian DNA and the English DNA. Like speaking about Australia, right? Like I don't know if you have you been to Australia ever?
No.
Oh, so in Australia, cricket is kind of like how baseball is in the US in the sense that it is not their most popular sport.
Right.
I had a friend who, like my best friend, lived in Melbourne for a couple of years, and he said that whenever people like MCG Boxing Day test, the first day is always sold out, right?
Correct.
He said more than half the people, like most people he knew, didn't really care as passionately about cricket as they did about rugby or Australian football. They just went to the boxing first day of the boxing test and most of the boxing day test days because it is the Melbourne boxing day test. It's like that. It's like part of their tradition. They all understand cricket, but they don't care about it. And he was there when in 2015 when they won the World Cup, and he expected the next day to his friends be like, haha, we won the World Cup, but nobody was really talking about it in Australia. Like Australia for us in the narrow cricketing world is this behemoth in the world of cricket, but within the larger universe of Australia, cricket is a necessary part, but not necessarily the most dominant part of their overall national character or societal character. So I think Test cricket can become that in India as well, in the sense that, like for us, Steve Smith or David Warner or Shane Warne or Steve Waugh, like these huge names. But in Australia, they will have different names while still respecting these guys. So I think that might be the way forward for Test cricket, is to identify a few, or not identify, but to exist in a few markets where it can occupy that space.
It's almost as if you're describing a public ritual. It is a part of community life. It's just something everybody does. Gaurav, on that note, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, and it was a delight to have a chat with you, and hopefully we can do this more often.
Definitely. I look forward to coming up with other interesting subjects on which I can pick your brains. Right. Thank you. That was Gaurav Sabnis, Professor of Marketing at Stevens School of Business, longtime cricket fan, talking about Test cricket and its role as a business and how to think about that in relation to its public existence in society.